Evergrande crisis worsens as defaults pile up. Ex-CEO detained. China Evergrande misses payments on $547 million onshore bond. Plus, you have China developers drop most in 9 months on Evergrande woes. So, welcome, friends. This is Chris, and this is your daily news fix. We're going to talk about the China Evergrande situation, global slowdowns, government shutdowns, and AI investment. So, let's start back with the Evergrande thing. When you're missing payments on $547 million, people start to notice that something's wrong, right? And what do? You start arresting people. We actually saw reports of this last weekend that they were arresting people, but they didn't necessarily announce or release any names. Today we got a few names. So one is an ex-CEO. This particular person, so Shah Ha-jun, he I guess was essentially insider trading, so selling bonds before public news was released that essentially the company was losing money. However, he's not the only one. You obviously have a former CEO. You also have a former CFO. The thing is, though, these guys quit last year. This is last year, so this is dated July 24th, 2022. So they've been kind of trying to wash their hands clean of this for a while. And one of the things that I'll say with this stuff is these people cannot act alone. It would be impossible. So I am sure there are tons of Chinese government officials involved, but they're going to try to just blame it on just a few bad actors. But there's no way you can have this much money involved and only have like one or two people. Like, for example, here they were saying, this is also last year, that they were trying to restructure 300 billion, that's with a B, billion in debt. Or you read these kind of headlines, this is from this year, that they might have lost $81 billion. And this is where, when I tell you guys about this stuff, I don't think anyone knows actually how much money is involved. I know it's a lot, right? We can see some different numbers, but when you get into these like kind of numbers are like, hey, we owe 300 billion, we're going to restructure it. Hey, we lost 81 billion. Now we're arresting people. I mean, it could be even bigger than we know. That's one of the things that the Chinese news tries to do. They'll release news, but it could be far worse. I really think so. And essentially, when you hear these kind of things, I do know that obviously people are going to be angry, going to want to claw back money. So again, they're arresting the CEO and CFO, former ones. The other thing too that was interesting, there was this odd headline here. I'll read it here for you guys. A senior Nomura banker barred from leaving mainland China. This has spooked the Chinese markets, and essentially, I guess this is according to reports that he can travel around China. He can go to McDonald's, he can go to restaurants, that kind of stuff, but he can't leave the country. Is like, okay, what? And I was reading through it, there wasn't really anything released on that, and so this kind of stuff, again, it's funny what is leaked and what is not leaked. And essentially it's spooking people. The other thing too, which is interesting, if you're in Russia, evidently you're picking up the tax bill for these kind of, activities. I can read headlines here. Taxpayers stuck paying bills for oligarchs seized yachts and mansions. And I guess if you're in Russia, as a taxpayer, you got to pay like $28,000 a week to maintain these kind of things. So, what's going to happen with all this missing money, say 81 billion, that is, we'll keep an eye on that. But, one of the things that I will say is I've seen several articles where people are looking at China like, well, should we invest? Should we not invest? So for those of you who are essentially dumpster diving, when you read these kind of headlines, property developers drop most in 9 months. This is real. I'll look at the markets in these things and like, yeah, it'll go down like 100% or 9%, 85% a day. And then like the next day it goes up, 50% or whatever. But it's definitely been on a downward trajectory. However, it is extremely volatile. And, myself, I think it's highly, highly risky. I wouldn't touch it, but you can make money on trading. And that's what some people appear to be doing. Like I said, it's really, really volatile when you look at this stuff. Moreover, you have these kind of headlines. Global trade falls at fastest pace since pandemic. Demand for goods weakens on the back of higher inflation, rate rises, and spending on services. This is a chart here to give you a general gist of it, right? So essentially what this is a year-over-year percentage change. And you can see in 2003, we're just dipping down, right? Things are slowing. One of the things that I will point out, which I just can't emphasize enough, for those of you who are like, oh, I don't care about Evergrande, I don't care about China, just remember that we're all connected, right? In order for us to say sell iPhones, we need people in China to buy said iPhones also too. We need people in China to say make said iPhones, right? Not just talking about the iPhone situation, but essentially, right, we're all connected. And this sort of I always ask you guys, in your industry, are you seeing a decrease in orders? And people say different things. So love to hear your thoughts on this. But yes, global trade is slowing. However, I will say one thing that's not slowing is my book. It's called Positive Angle. It's available on Amazon. And if you enjoy the channel, enjoy the content, I really encourage you to pick up a copy because we can all use some positive news. And that's why I wrote it, Positive Angle. Also, too, over in Europe, this is the European Central Bank, they're saying bet on the rate cut is premature. So essentially, it's the same kind of message that you heard from the Fed. But basically, all the central banks around the world have to follow what the Fed does. So if we're keeping our interest rates high in USA, everyone's like, okay, fine, we'll do it, higher for longer, that kind of stuff. And that certainly spooks markets in Europe. Moreover, the bankers are feeling the heat. So this is an interesting one. This is over at Citibank. And you can see here, get off the train. This is Citibank's Jan Fraser. She's basically kind of threatening employees in a way. And it's not a small amount of employees. Evidently, over at Citigroup, they have 240,000 employees. And this is the quote that she told everyone over there at the bank. Get on board. We have incredibly high ambitions for this bank. And the train, it's going to move fast. So lean in. Help us win clients. Help us deliver the changes. Or get off the train. It's going to be tough because if the money's not flowing, right? If the money's not there, then there's going to be a fight among bankers to attract, clients and get your money over at our bank. And a lot of clients, this is real, maybe not trust the banks anymore. We'll keep an eye on this one, but there was a report, I think it was last week, which we talked about, where bankers in China had a decrease in wages of 40%, like crazy amounts. And we've seen slowdowns in the mortgage departments and the U.S. banks, and also too, we know that trading volume is down, and the same with IPO activity. We had a couple big IPOs recently. It was Instacart and then ARM, but we haven't had massive amounts of money. Just hey, I want to give it to to the markets. And then also too, we've had those global problems with India and Canada having a spat. So when you see this kind of language of hey, we're going to fight for clients, you better get with the program or you're going to get fired. That just sort of tells you the full story there. Moreover, the UAW is still on strike. And one of the arguments that they always make of why we're striking is because CEOs make too much money and we're not paid that much. So this is the interesting one. Auto CEOs make 300 times what workers make, how that stacks up. And basically what this is a chart comparing different companies in the market and sort of how it compares. And so you can see here, for example, Stellantis. So their CEO makes 365 times more than the average employee. General Motors, 362 times more. And then Ford, 281. So that's the least. And then how does that compare? So the oil company is actually towards the bottom end of the scale. Towards the top end of the scale is actually Coca-Cola. And I guess the CEO makes 1,883 times more than the average worker. Now, I understand these numbers seem outrageous, etc. I'm not defending CEOs, but I'll just say it's hard to compare historically because companies today are global, right? They're much, much bigger than they were in the past. I'm not saying necessarily the CEO has to get 1,883 times more, but if you were to compare Coca-Cola to this, say, for example, when it was only in the USA and only selling to Americans, it's quite different than, say, you have Coca-Cola that sells everywhere around the world, and you could have workers, any number of places where the incomes of workers is much, much different. That's the difference that we have today is that, if American workers are too expensive, the companies will just ship their jobs overseas. Or we also, too, have automation, right? These things are different. So, again, I'm not defending this. I'm just showing you the numbers. But I want to say, sometimes you can't necessarily compare, CEO salaries today of, say, 100 years ago. It's not quite the same 101. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we need that much disparity. I hope you understand my point in that. One of the strikes is now, I'll say officially over, but looks like it's over. This is with the writers, and I'm talking about Hollywood. So I read through it. They just said they had a deal, but they didn't release any details, which I thought was a bit weird. However, the WGA, this is the Writers Guild of America, they did say that they're happy with the deal. There's no word yet on whether or not the actors are going to make a deal, because both the writers and the actors of Hollywood were on strike. So, but as of now, talking about strikes here, the big one, the auto workers are still on strike. And we just checked on that a few days ago. They started originally with 3 locations, and then they decided to expand it nationwide. So I think it could get ugly this week. And again, I mentioned really clearly before with the sort of thing of workers is that a lot of this is automation. Don't discount that. It does matter. Like for example, and ChatGPT auto workers is not directly related in the sense of like ChatGPT is not taking auto workers' jobs, but the idea of AI and robots is. Evidently, though, ChatGPT is getting an upgrade, and I think a lot of white-collar jobs are a bit nervous about this one. So evidently now, I didn't play with it myself, and you guys can chime in the comments if you have played with it recently, but I guess it can talk to you and now hear you. It's going to basically be like an Ask Siri kind of thing on your phone. And one thing that I thought was interesting about it is that they keep hyping this stuff up, right? Because it is not necessarily what people think it is. When you hear AI, you're thinking, this thing can talk and it can be independent thought. Essentially what it is right now, it's basically a really advanced Google search engine. That's sort of the way that I think about it. It sort of tries to mimic a natural human speech. Is not necessarily like an AI in terms of sentient. It's not like awake, self-aware, not that kind of stuff. But I think the average person, when they hear the word AI, they're thinking sort of like, Terminator and those sort of things. If you guys understand my point here. So it's a data scraping, more of a search engine at the moment. But yes, it will be able to talk. And, a lot of the companies are feeling the pressure probably from their board members, et cetera, like, hey, we heard about this AI hype. Why aren't we get involved? And we got to put money into it. So Amazon's like, hey, we're going to put $4 billion in this thing called Anthropic. And so they're going to try to challenge ChatGPT. So it's the same as when something comes out hyped, like other people want to jump on board while the money's still there. Because right now we're fighting for dollars. This to me, though I've mentioned several times on the channel, it feels very cryptocurrency-ish to me, where it's, really bubbly. However, as long as the money's there and people are into it, I guess go for it. Meta evidently is going to try it. This was an interesting one. So you can read the headlines here. Meta to push for younger users with AI chatbot characters. Now, here's the deal. I was going through this. They're going to do a couple different things over at Meta. One is they're going to create characters that are sort of the original IP. The other one, which is interesting, this says would allow celebrities and creators to use their own AI chatbots. Now, we've seen this before. Basically, what you can do, and this is like, what was this? This was, in May. I remember we did a story on this back then. Basically, you have the social media person, scan their image, scan their voice, or record the voice, however you want to say it. And then you have the AI talk just like you, and then you would rate yourself out for $1 a minute. And you're like a companion girlfriend, for as long as someone was willing to pay. And you can text it like, hey, how are you doing? They'll say, I'm fine. And it'll just be in her voice. And so essentially what Meta / Facebook is doing is, if I read this correctly, and I think I do, is they're going to set it up to so where, and I promise you Will Smith will be on board, or Snoop Dogg, these kind of people. They're going to be, recording their voice, selling their image to a Meta, and then making money off of that. And so like, if you want AI / Snoop Dogg to give you driving directions while you navigate around the city, I'm sure you're going to get that in the future. And I'm sure Taylor Swift will get involved in these kind of things. And there'll be all sorts of discussion on, how much should we sell our name, image, likeness for? It's going to be an interesting question, but I find it really interesting because not only is Meta talking about, having influencers and, celebrities basically give their image a voice and create their own AI chatbots. They want to make their own characters. And so I guess one of them they're developing, and they think it's going to be popular with kids, called Bob the Robot. And this is how they describe it here. It is a SAS Master General, right? Quote, superior intellect, sharp wit, and biting sarcasm. And the way they describe it is they kind of want to make it like the Futurama Robot. So this one here, the Bender Robot. I'm not sure. I don't know if this is what kids want. I mean, maybe they do. Here's a quote here. Him being a sassy robot taps into the type of farcical humor that is resonating with young people. Bring me your questions, but don't expect any sugar-coated responses. So I get that young people are want humor and these kind of things. And honestly, I have to do YouTube and I have to throw in like jokes, otherwise people don't watch. So I get that people want that. But I find it strange. Like, I just give you an example. So let's say I go over to Google and I run a search and they say, hey, Google, tell me which car to buy. And if Google's like, why do you need a car? Or do you think a car is going to get you a girlfriend? Like, I'm not really sure I want that in my search results. Or like I say, hey, Google, give me some recipes on apple pie. And Google's like, you're getting kind of fat there, Chris. So I don't know. Maybe that's what kids want. I just said that's what the first thing that came into my mind is like, do I want an attitude with everything? For me, maybe not, but it is what it is, and we'll see if Meta is successful on that. Speaking of successful or not successful, the government shutdown. So it may happen. Evidently, Moody's is saying, hey, it would be negative, and this is whether or not they'll downgrade the U.S. government in terms of whether or not we pay back our debts. But it's getting to be more real. We have shut down the government in the past. I was just looking this up. So this was basically the last time was here, December 18th, or December 2018, I should say, sorry. And that was for 34 days. And then we also had a long shutdown in 1995. That was in December. That was for 21 days. And then in September 2013 for 16 days. So it could go on quite a while. Before I was like, they're not going to do it. But I mean, you read the reports and basically the Republicans have control of the House and they're infighting is my understanding. There's a wing of them that, just don't want to approve any spending, which I think is fine, right? If that's what you believe, go for it. That's how our system works. The issue is like, okay, so are we going to close? What are we doing? And can we at least, come up with some sort of agreement? But this is sort of how Americans are. And I want to point this out. I mentioned to you just yesterday, but if you haven't seen this stuff, you can look at the videos. I'll just tell you basically. We have a real problem in the USA. If you go to a national NFL, right, National Football League, right, the pro football, people are fighting in the stands, like regular fans. And they're fighting with each other. You're not just fighting with another team's fans. You're fighting within your own fans. And it's multiple stadiums, not just one. And it's actually a problem. I mean, these are headlines. Civil fights break out in NFL stadiums. It was like, I saw one in Texas. I saw one in New England. And I saw one in, that was like the San Francisco one. And like I said, it's all over. And this is something that we've seen before in the USA. Say on the air rage, if you remember when people started flying again after the pandemic, there were people like wouldn't wear a mask, wouldn't want to wear a seatbelt or whatever, nonsense, and they start hitting, physically hitting the flight attendants, that kind of stuff. So I just feel like the government shut down, Americans fighting NFL stadiums. I just feel like sadly this is the USA these days, and I think a lot of it reflects on people are feeling the stress and the pressures of the changing economic world, right? The same way we talk about sort of like the UAW kind of stuff, right? It's all related, right? If I'm giving you tons of money every single day and you feel like everything, is fairly affordable, then you're not really stressed out. But, when you're stressed out all the time over money and then suddenly like your football team is losing and the fan in front of you, spills Coke on you, you just kind of lose it. Like you just go crazy. And I think that's the state of America these days, is just basically going crazy. You can take a look at this too as well. I guess if we shut down, then maybe we won't get, like our CPI numbers or that kind of stuff on time. Moreover, this was a crazy one as a headline here. This is coming from the U.S. Department of Defense, September 25th. You can see this here, just this, now. With government shutdown, troops still protect the nation, but possibly without pay. Yes, we have a volunteer military, but, we do pay these people. It's a job. And, this kind of stuff is not cool. So hopefully the government can get its act in shape, and hopefully Americans can get their act in shape. But this is what we're facing right now. So anyway, this has been your daily news fix. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any one of these stories, and I'll catch you next time.